Hi there. Welcome to The Educator's Voice. This is going to be a podcast by teachers for teachers. And really we're going to be unpacking the goods, the bads and the uglies of being a teacher in Queensland and a member of the Queensland Teachers Union. So welcome along. We're really pleased that you're here for episode 1. There are more hotly contested episodes to come after this, of course, but thanks for coming on board and being here with us. My name is Cresta Richardson and I'm the President of the Queensland Teachers Union, and I'm a very proud teacher. I've held a range of positions within teaching. I've been a teacher, an acting deputy, an ST LAN, I've done education advising, all the things to help keep myself new and refreshed in the job that is the rewarding job of teaching. But we also know that teaching is not all rewards and that there are challenges attached to our job and our systems. So we're looking forward to going through this process with you and talking about the goods, the bads and the uglies, like I said before.
Thanks, Cresta. My name is Leah Olsson. I'm the Vice President of the Queensland Teachers Union, and I've also held a range of jobs around the state, including music teacher, behaviour specialist, as well as head of curriculum. And also I've done a highly accomplished and lead teacher assessor. The Educator's Voice is a podcast where we will hear member stories, we'll hear about the excellent campaign action of the QTU, and most importantly, to keep the conversations happening for educators.
We are here to represent public education and public school teachers and school leaders. Public education is a social contract that we have with the community, and we're really proud of that connection that we have to public and state education in Queensland, because our teachers and our members and school leaders are in every community around this state. So we go right up the way to all of the islands of the Torres Strait and right out to the border of Camberwell and down to Quamby and then down coming back through, of course, along the New South Wales border there. We've got Gundawindi, we've got St George, Stanthorpe, Warwick, all those communities, and then of course our coastal line and everything in between. So Leah and I have taught in a number of those communities around the state, and we're very proud of the work that we have done with our colleagues around the state, and we're really looking forward to highlighting some of the issues in state education for our members and the community.
So Cresta, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into teaching?
Well, thanks for the question, Leah. Teaching, when I was a little tacker, teaching was always something that I wanted to do. I went to Healy State School in Mount Isa, went preschool and 1 to 7 there, and I was really lucky to go to school at Healy State School, and I had really great teachers. They all brought something different. Male, female teachers, and I think in a place like Mount Isa at the time, it was, it is and was a really multicultural town. It had, because of the mining community there, it had, such a multicultural diversity, and to go to school in such a multicultural environment was great, and I was just taught about fairness and social justice, and that came from my family as well. But I always wanted to be a teacher in primary school. Then went to high school. It wasn't so much what I wanted to do there then, so I sort of had a look at and flirted with a few of other things that I might want to do when I grew up, but it was still one of the professions that I applied for in grade 12 and came through. I had the TE score, old TE score days, and got the TE really well to get into education and teaching. And that was at the time when it was transferring from the 3-year diploma to the 4-year degree. Had a yarn to my mum and we decided to go for the 4-year degree, get it done and dusted at the time. So it was the first offer that I got, and I decided, because Australia was just going into a recession at the time, so being in teaching and getting a secure job in teaching was sort of where we decided that was the right place for me to go. And so I've kind of ended up in a rightful spot, I think. It always felt like the right fit for me to go into education. How about you, Leah?
So for me, teaching is a bit of a calling. So I went to preschool as a 4-year-old at Crescent Lagoon State School in West Rockhampton. And that day I came home from preschool, I said to Mum and Dad, I want to be a teacher. I just loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved the teachers. I loved the activities we did. We sang, we played outside, and I just wanted to be part of it. And as I went through my primary school journey, again, you mentioned teachers who influenced you. I had one particular teacher, Mr. Gray, who was my teacher from grade 4, 5 and 6, 3 years in a row, and he really took education really seriously, not just in the classroom, but he really gave us the opportunities to get out and explore the world. We went on excursions, we went on camps. He had excellent relationships with parents, and I went to Central Queensland University in Rockhampton, and I did the 3-year degree. I did upgrade later on, but once I got into the classrooms and did my teaching degree, I just wanted to be able to give kids exactly the same experience that I had in primary school, which was as well, we had music, we had sport, we had so many opportunities. We even had a swimming pool at Crescent Lagoon, so I learned how to swim there.
Pretty plush then,
It
mate,
was,
if
it
you had
was.
a pool in your school. We didn't have that.
It was excellent. So everything about primary school I have such fond memories of and want to be able to give that to kids.
It's a really nice start, isn't it, Leah, to be able to reflect on what brought you into the profession and has kept you in the profession. And you've always taught in the state sector. So can you, like we're talking about state education, the goods, the bads, the uglies, can you tell us about a story of your connection with state education when you were a teacher?
Look, I think one of the important things around state education is that you get to teach kids from all sorts of backgrounds. And to be able to do that, my motto is having connection before curriculum. And so that you have that connection with those kids, you build that relationship so that you can get the best out of kids, no matter where they're from. And you want to give that opportunity so that everyone has that quality of education. We've had many students over many years go on to do some really extraordinary things. And public education has been at the forefront for those students. We've even had some kids go through the state system, then go into our TAFE system as well. And I know that TAFE really does change lives as well. Having personal experience with my own children, one of them who's gone through TAFE, really given him that support and that experience for real world experiences. So I think public education has a huge impact on the students, but also society as well.
It's a bit of a melting pot, isn't it, the old state school and education, and teachers do a really great job with the resources that they have, which is not enough.
They have, and we could do a lot more, and we all know that, that it's not enough. So, Cresta, we've sort of talked about the importance there of state education or public education in Australia, but particularly here in Queensland. What about you?
Well, I started my teaching, post university as a supply and contract teacher, and what a way to learn the craft of teaching, doing supply and contract work. So back in those days, in your day too, Leah, when we came out of university, a full-time job wasn't a guarantee, and there was a surplus of us. So at the time, I had come out of university and I had a good time at university and got a lower rating, so wasn't entitled to a permanent position straight up.
The old S rating.
Yes, so I got an S3, not quite the S4.
Dear.
And like I said, I had a good time at university. And then went through and did a lot of supply teaching on the Sunshine Coast. And really, I learnt so much. And the people who I worked with, and I don't even think it was deliberate mentorship. It was just, this is how things done. This is how we do things in our system. These are the important things of our jobs. And, it was just so powerful and really, hooked me permanently to the system. And there were probably times where I could have gone and looked at jobs in the private sector, but I was committed to the state sector and educating my own kids through the state sector because I know that it's a leveler and every kid deserves access to a great education.
Absolutely. Yes, and it's really interesting, isn't it, 30 years later? It's hard to believe that we have been around. Yes, we are that old. that 30 years ago
Yeah.
that we were told probably don't go into teaching because you will never get a job.
Never get a job.
And
you
now-
have to go bush.
Yes,
You've got to go do your country service to get a job.
which we did.
Yep.
Which we did.
Yep.
And got a permanent position straight away. But it really has opened the doors to be able to move across the state. I've really been lucky in the fact that I've had worked and have been able to work in so many different geographical locations. So, yes, very interesting in that respect. So here we are after a really long career in teaching, and we're sitting in the studio at the QTU building here in Milton. So I'm wondering, Cresta, how did we even get to this point? How did you get to this point?
I got to this point because being in a union was what you did. Having, like I said, growing up in Mount Isa, it was back in the day when basically you had to be a member of a union, and Mount Isa in those days was a really strong union community. The mine had shut down in the late 60s with 2 long strikes. So unionism was part of what I grew up with, even though I wasn't actually really strongly in a union family. So it was sort of around that time. But I also have an uncle who was a teacher in the state sector, and he had come over from the United States. So he came over in the 70s as an import, and, like a lot of our members came over from the United States and had really long and worthwhile contributions to state education in Queensland. So Jim came over, was a member of the Queensland Teachers Union, hooked up with my auntie, and like I said, I was already pretty sure I was going to be a teacher. And so, the conversations about being a teacher and being a member of the Queensland Teachers Union, it's what you do. For a time there, he was a member of the IEU as well, and had a job in the private sector, and it didn't go so well. But I know that the private, the IEU supported him through a process when it didn't work out so well for him. And then he came back to the Queensland Teachers Union and finished out his career in Townsville secondary schools, state schools. So it was always something part of what you do. And like I said, when I started teaching, I was doing supply and contract. And back in those days, you weren't necessarily a member of the Queensland Teachers Union if you did supply and contract work. But I'd read the form, and I knew that there was something there around a cheaper rate if you were on supply and contract. So I actually rang here and said, I'd like to join because I'm a supply teacher. And they were kind of like, oh, that's a little bit unusual. But it was always something that I wanted to do. So when I started teaching, joining the Queensland Teachers Union, they stick together, they're two things that belong together and should be together. It's not only the industrial voice, but the importance of the professional voice as well, being a member of the Queensland Teachers Union. And I've always found our publications to challenge, I think, the status quo, and I think done in a really smart and clever way, that we don't just have to go with what is presented and that we can ask questions. And I think that should be valued, as union members and teachers and educated people, we should be able to ask the question. And I think that's really important. And I think that my union involvement has assisted me in being able to do that. And I think it's a good skill. Not that it's not hard to have the conversations sometimes, but I think they go hand in hand and belong together. How about you, Leah?
So growing up, we weren't a union family either. In fact, we sort of one of those families that don't talk about politics at the dinner table. That was sort of how I grew up. So in my first year of teaching, pretty much in the first few days, I joined the QTU. And in 1997, that's when in 1998, we took some significant action, 2 or 3 strikes that we had around SPS, which was the Student Performance Standards.
I remember.
But the other one that came out was around leading schools, and we all know how that has rolled out. So I had been a member and, took action at that time, but it wasn't really until after I'd had my children and then they'd sort of grown up a little bit that I was at Vienna Wood State School there in down at Alexandra Hills, and our organiser came out, and that was we went to morning tea, and those were the days where you sat around the staff room and everyone had a chat and sat around the table, and the organiser came out and said, gave gave the update of what was happening and then said, oh, by the way, we need a new rep or we need another rep. And everyone's head sort of just went down and I said, oh, okay. So I sort of just tagged along and then Kavina said, well, that's good because we've got a meeting this afternoon. And so I went to the meeting and then next minute I was invited to come to an area council as a proxy. And I went up to Mullaney where we had a joint area council. They were very popular back in the day. And I just thought to myself, wow, what is this? I have missed out on so much. I wish I'd known all this information a long time ago. And then I just kept on tagging along, and then basically got onto executive and then came into this role. So it's one of those journeys that it's not always ingrained in people, but I think it certainly has. And again, those skills, what you learned as a union rep, makes you a better teacher. Absolutely, 100%.
It's really important, that link, isn't it? And, like you can get out of your union membership what you put into it. There are so many opportunities for training, professional, industrial training, getting involved in the democratic processes of the union. There's a lot there if people want to have a go.
There is.
Yeah.
There certainly is. So last year, Cresta, we had some really significant action and historic action, actually. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, it was the first time since 2009, I think, that, teachers stood up and said, pretty much, we're not going to take this and go out on strike, and that was really significant because we've got a couple of generations of members who have never had industrial action in that manner. So I think us going on strike and having so many people around the state, I know we were here in Brisbane and I had to do media early on the ABC, and I got to the convention centre, I think, at about 7:30, and, you're never quite sure how things are going to pan out, are you? And I got there about 7:30, the interview was about 7:45, and there were already people there. And I thought, oh, I don't think we have a lot to worry about. And I think in relation to turn up. So, I think that the buy-in that we got in Brisbane and around the state, and that feeling, not only the buy-in, but that feeling of being united and together. And we're in this together, It's tough going for our members at the moment. There's a teacher shortage, there's work, continuing workload compounding, which is exacerbated by a teacher shortage. There's, we've got issues of occupational violence, the resourcing. Our teachers and school leaders do so much with an egg carton. It's well more than the 101 things with an egg carton that we used to do. It's up to 120. And I think our members don't get the recognition that they deserve. We give a lot to the students around this state, and just the feeling of connection of everybody in that room in Brisbane, but you could sense it around the state as well. You heard stories of people coming, down from Gympie and the Sunshine Coast in their QTU, and basically the QTU train. And then, people were reflecting the other day on the trains coming up from down Springfield Way and further down the Gold Coast and everything. And that collectivism that was in the room, we're all together. And then having the second strike day on that hot day in November, what an amazing outcome again for people to come out again. There's significant cost of living pressures, and for every member who did that and went out on strike a second time in a short period of time, well done to the members of the Queensland Teachers Union, because in standing up, we continue to show to the government and the department that, we're worth more. Our teachers are worth more, our school leaders are worth more, and our kids are worth more. And, our arbitration is going to be a long road, and we know that. But our members have stood up and we remain united. And I think good on us, so we should. So we should. We value our profession and we invite others to do that as well. So that was fairly significant, obviously, as the president and vice president last year for us, Leah, but also our members. Have you, can you talk about a campaign recently, or maybe not even so recent, that you can talk about and reflect on?
So one of the campaigns that I am really, really proud of and been part of, in fact, it's part of the reason I ended up becoming active within the QTU, was the Gonski campaign. Everyone knows that it was a really long, drawn-out campaign, and sometimes change takes time. And at the beginning of last year, we were able to secure federally 25% of the school resourcing standard from the federal government, which was up 5%.
Significant.
And we know what happened with previous LNP governments federally, what they've done and ripped money out of state schools and public education across the country. And I know that is something that I really, really was passionate about as an activist, but also coming into this role and speaking in the media and speaking to members around the state about, was because I know that money and that resourcing coming into schools. And again, we teach kids from multiple backgrounds, kids with disabilities, our First Nations kids, and just sometimes an average kid who might need a little bit of a hand here every now and then, and that money making a difference for those kids every day.
And having it guaranteed, I mean, it's going to take some time, but what a win. That was an amazing win, and we deserve that in our state schools. It's that social contract. It's been here since, state education is so important. Thanks, Leah, for your time on the first episode of The Educator's Voice. To those of you out there, thank you for your time and participation in listening to The Educator's Voice. Like we said at the beginning, this is a podcast by teachers for teachers. And, we'll be unpacking some of the curly issues around education that Leah and I have been talking about today. We've got a bit going on, but there are also many rewarding things that go on in our job and keep us coming back day to day. So thanks for your time. There will be more episodes coming your way. We really appreciate your company and invite you to come along the way with us. Leah?
So again, the QT is here for you, and if you need support in any way, you've got workplace issues, please reach out to our QTAD, which is Queensland Teachers Assist Desk. You can have a look on the web for our information brochures or also contact our organisers.
And Leah, can you tell us about any new episodes and how they might be coming out?
So we've got more episodes coming of The Educator's Voice, and you can keep an eye out on our socials for more episodes, which will drop over the coming weeks.
Thanks, Leah. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.